He humiliated his Luna on their anniversary. 3 days later, she married his greatest enemy. Seraphina stood in front of the mirror, smoothing the fabric of her red dress with careful hands. She had chosen this dress weeks ago. She had tried it on 3 times. She had asked her best friend Mara if the color was too much, and Mara had laughed and said, "Sera, you are the Luna of this pack. There is no such thing as too much." Tonight was their 3rd anniversary. 3 years since Dominic had looked across a crowded gathering and felt the pull of the mate bond draw him to her. 3 years since he had taken her hand and said, in front of everyone, that she was his. 3 years of learning each other, of building something she believed in deeply. Sera had planned the evening herself. The dining hall of the Iron Moon Packhouse had been decorated with warm candlelight and white flowers. She had written a letter, 4 pages long, telling Dominic everything she felt but sometimes struggled to say out loud. And tucked inside that letter was the most important thing, a small folded piece of paper from the healer, confirming what she had suspected for 2 weeks. She was carrying his child. She had held that secret close like something precious, waiting for exactly the right moment to share it. Tonight felt like that moment. She went downstairs early and greeted the packmates who had gathered. Elders, warriors, families, they all smiled at her, and she smiled back. She stood near the entrance, her letter folded neatly in her hands, and she waited. Dominic was supposed to arrive at 7. By 7:40, the room had grown quiet in a way that felt uncomfortable. People shifted in their seats. A few looked toward the door. Sera kept her expression calm, though her fingers had gone tight around the letter. Then the door opened. Dominic walked in. He was dressed well, as always, tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that filled a room without effort. The pack straightened instinctively when they saw him. That was the effect of an alpha. Sera had always admired it. But her eyes moved past him almost immediately, because he was not alone. The woman beside him was named Vivienne Harlow. Sera knew who she was. Everyone in the pack knew who she was. She had been part of Dominic's life before the mate bond, before Sera, before everything. She was tall and striking, with dark hair and the easy confidence of someone who had never once questioned whether she belonged somewhere. Sera watched, very still, as Dominic guided Vivienne across the room, toward the head table, toward Sera's chair. He pulled it out for Vivienne, and she sat down, smoothing her dress casually, as though she had sat there 100 times before. Sera walked forward. She kept her steps even. She kept her face composed. "Dominic," she said quietly, "what is happening?" He looked at her then, and what she saw in his eyes was not guilt, not hesitation, not the expression of a man who had made a mistake and knew it. What she saw was something settled and decided, as though he had thought this through carefully and arrived at a conclusion long before tonight. He raised his hand, signaling for the room's attention. The last few murmurs faded. Every person in the hall looked at him. "I have something to say," he said. His voice carried the way an alpha's voice always did. Clear, firm, reaching every corner of the room without effort. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. But the anniversary dinner is not happening. There is something more important I need to address." Sera did not move. "I am rejecting my mate bond with Seraphina Calloway, effective tonight." The silence that followed was the kind that pressed against the ears. No one breathed. No one moved. Sera felt the words land against her one by one, like something cold and heavy, but she did not flinch. Dominic continued. He spoke about the pack's future. He spoke about strength and bloodlines, and what a Luna needed to be. He said that Sera had always been too gentle, too soft, not built for the hardness that pack leadership required. He said that Vivienne, a pureblood wolf with a warrior family behind her, was the kind of woman Iron Moon deserved at its side. He said all of this in front of every person who had ever bowed their head to Sera. When he finished, there was still silence. Sera looked down at the letter in her hands. 4 pages. The healer's note tucked inside. The words she had spent days finding, because she had always wanted to say the right thing, always wanted to be careful with the things that mattered. She looked at the candle on the table nearest to her. She held the letter over the flame. It caught slowly, then all at once. She held it until the heat reached her fingers, then set the burning paper in the empty dish beside the candle, and watched it turn to ash. Then she turned around and walked out of the dining hall. She did not run. She did not cry. She did not look back once. Her room was packed before dawn. She had not slept. She had moved through the familiar space in the dark, taking only what was truly hers, the things she had brought before she became someone's Luna, the things that had nothing to do with Dominic or Iron Moon, or the life she had tried to build here. By the time the first gray light appeared at the window, her bags were at the door. Mara came and found her there. She did not say anything for a long moment. Then she said, "Where will you go?" Sera had already decided. She had known about Ashvale for years. Everyone in the region knew about it, the same way they knew about its alpha, Caden Blackthorne, the man Dominic had called his enemy since they were boys competing for territory and recognition. They had clashed at every council meeting, disagreed on every policy, and built a rivalry so well known that pack children told stories about it. What most people did not know, what Sera had quietly learned over 3 years of managing pack correspondence and supply records, was that anonymous aid had been flowing into Iron Moon's most vulnerable households for years. Food during the hard winters, medicine when the pack healer ran short. Small amounts of money, routed through channels that were designed to be untraceable. Sera had traced them anyway. Every single one had come from Ashvale, back to Alpha Caden Blackthorne, the cold, controlled, brilliant man Dominic had called his enemy since boyhood. She had known for 2 years. She had never told Dominic. Even then, some quiet instinct in her had known that knowledge was not safe in his hands. She arrived at Ashvale's eastern gate as the afternoon light was turning gold. She had not sent word ahead. She had no invitation, and no plan beyond the knowledge that she had nowhere else to go, and one small instinct, telling her that this was the right direction. The gate guard looked at her carefully. Then he stepped aside and said, "I'll let the Alpha know you're here." She had expected to wait. She had expected questions, perhaps suspicion, perhaps to be turned away politely. Caden Blackthorne came to the gate himself within 10 minutes. He was not what she had imagined. She had built a picture of him in her mind from Dominic's descriptions: cold, calculating, harsh. The man standing in front of her was controlled, certainly. His expression gave very little away, but his eyes were steady and direct, and when he looked at her, she had the odd feeling that he was actually seeing her, not just assessing the situation she represented. "Seraphina Calloway," he said. "Sera," she said. "Just Sera." He nodded once. "Come in." He gave her a room in the east wing, warm and quiet, with a window that looked out over the forest. He called for a healer without her asking. He had food sent up. He did not pepper her with questions, or make her feel like a problem to be managed. That evening, he came and sat across from her in the small sitting room attached to her quarters, and he simply waited. She told him everything. She told him about the anniversary, about the dining hall, about Dominic's words, and the faces of the packmates watching her. She told him about the letter she had burned, and then, because she was tired of holding it, and there was something in his stillness that made honesty feel safe, she told him about the pregnancy. He listened through all of it, without interrupting once. When she finished, the room was quiet. He was looking at the window, thoughtful. "He didn't deserve to know," he said finally. It was not the response she had expected. She had expected something political, something strategic. He was an alpha, after all. But it was exactly the thing she had needed to hear. Something simple and honest, and completely without agenda. She pressed her lips together and nodded. He stood to leave and paused at the door. "You can stay as long as you need," he said. "There are no conditions on that." "I know," she said, surprising herself. "That's why I came here." On the morning of the 3rd day, Caden came to her again. He sat down across from her at the small table where she had been eating breakfast, and he looked at her with the same steady directness that she was beginning to recognize as simply the way he was. "I have a proposal," he said. "You don't have to say yes. I want to be clear about that before I say anything else." She set down her cup. "Tell me." He explained the old law, the one the elders still honored, the one written in the earliest pack records. A rejected Luna, who chose to remarry within the sacred 3-day grace period, could sever all previous pack ties permanently. Everything transferred: the bond lineage, the legal standing, the protection of any children. "If we marry before sundown today," he said, "Dominic loses all claim. To you and to the child." Sera was quiet for a moment. "You'd do that? Tie yourself to someone you barely know?" "I know enough," he said. "And I'll be honest with you. I've watched Iron Moon for 3 years. I've watched how that pack runs. I've watched you manage correspondence, and handle disputes, and hold things together quietly, while your alpha took the credit. I know more about you than you might think." She looked at him for a long moment. "This isn't a love story," she said. "Not yet. Maybe not ever." "No," he agreed. "It's something more honest than that right now. 2 people choosing to build something real out of the wreckage." She nodded slowly. "All right," she said. "Let's do it honestly then." The ceremony was held at dawn, in the open field behind the pack house, under a pale blue sky with the first birds just beginning to call. The Moon Elder stood between them, her white robes still in the quiet morning air. A small gathering of Ashvale's people stood witness. It was nothing like the grand ceremonies Sera had always imagined growing up. It was simple and unadorned, and completely real. When the Moon Elder spoke the ancient words, and called upon the goddess to witness, Sera closed her eyes. She felt the cool morning air on her skin. She felt steady, in a way she had not felt in 3 years, maybe longer. And then she felt something else. It started in her chest, a warmth, sudden and unmistakable, moving outward through her like light filling a room. Her eyes opened. She saw Caden's expression change for the first time since she had met him. The careful control fell away for just a moment, replaced by something raw and genuine, and stunned. The golden thread appeared between them, visible to every person present, a shimmer in the air, delicate and certain, the unmistakable sign of a true mate bond activating. The Moon Elder stopped speaking. She looked at the thread. Then she looked at both of them, and her eyes filled with tears. Around them, the witnesses went completely still. An elder near the back made a sound that was half a gasp and half a sob. Someone whispered, "The goddess herself." Sera and Caden looked at each other across the space between them, both of them understanding, at the same moment, what this meant. She had been given the wrong mate. 3 years of her life spent on a bond that was never the true one, while the real one had been standing on the other side of a border, sending anonymous food and medicine to people he had never met. The Moon Elder completed the ceremony in a voice thick with emotion. When it was done, Caden reached out and took Sera's hand. He held it carefully, like something worth taking care of. "I didn't expect that," he said quietly. "Neither did I," she said. He looked at her, and for the first time, he smiled. It was a small smile, careful and new, but completely genuine. "I suppose we'll figure it out together." "Together," she agreed. The wedding invitation reached Dominic at noon. He read it 3 times. Then he drove to Ashvale and stood at the gate and demanded to see Sera. Caden came himself, unhurried, and showed him the sealed bond record, Moon Elder's signature, goddess's mark, witnessed and permanent. Dominic's face went through several things in quick succession. "Is she happy?" he asked finally. His voice had lost the alpha authority it usually carried. He sounded, for the first time, like an ordinary man. Caden considered the question as if it genuinely deserved thought. "She's at peace," he said. "That's more than you ever gave her." Dominic stood there for another moment. Then he turned and walked back to his car and drove away. The seasons moved forward, the way seasons do. Ashvale grew and strengthened. Sera took her place as Luna, not because the title was handed to her, but because she earned it the way she had always done things. Quietly, consistently, paying attention to the people others overlooked. The pack loved her not out of obligation, but because she made them feel seen. Caden was not a soft man, but he was a good one. He was honest, he was fair, he listened. He learned, over time, to say the things he felt instead of keeping them carefully managed. And Sera learned that the things he chose to say were always worth hearing. They built something between them that was not perfect but was real, and real turned out to be worth more than anything she had tried to hold on to before. Their child was born on a night when the moon was full and bright over Ashvale's forest. Caden sat beside her and held her hand the entire time, and when the healer placed the baby in his arms, Sera watched his face do the same thing it had done on their wedding morning, the careful control falling away, replaced by something completely unguarded. He looked at her over the top of the baby's head. "Thank you," he said. "Not for the child exactly. For everything. For choosing Ashvale. For the honesty. For building this with him." "Thank you," she said back. She meant it the same way. Somewhere across the territory border, Iron Moon continued to quietly struggle. Dominic stepped down from his position before the year was out. No one was entirely surprised. Some nights, the Ashvale border wolves reported seeing a lone figure standing at the tree line between the two territories, motionless in the dark. They mentioned it once to Caden, who nodded and said to leave him be. Sera, when she heard about it, felt nothing but a quiet, settled kind of peace. She had stopped looking back on the night she walked out of that dining hall with her head up, and her steps even, and she had not started again since. She was done looking back. She had everything she needed right here. Said, Dawn, end of story.